First of all, thanks Alex for the introduction. Much appreciated. Super happy to be here today with Krish and Anna. As we mentioned, we're going to talk about PMF, product market fit. And when you think about that, there's obviously three components, right? There's product, there's market, and there's fit. And each will be, dependent on a different lens you're taking, different business that you're targeting, whether that's SME or enterprise or somewhere in the middle. And so we're going to talk about each of these three components today, and maybe starting with market. Now, market is actually nothing but a group of customers. And yet when we, as an investor, when we see pitches, very often people don't really talk about the customers enough. So let's start by talking about the customer, because again, that makes up your market. Ladies first, Anna, maybe starting with you, like when you started out, who were you building for? Did you have a good picture of that customer and what you were building for that audience in that market?
Well, we were always building for the head of P&L, chief commercial officer, or a CMO's office. But, traditionally, they were the economic buyers, but not necessarily the platform users. Back then, CDOs didn't really have a place since their roles were quite new, and they seldom carry a P&L responsibility. Nowadays, we've seen a surge or a massive convergence of CTOs, CPOs, CMOs, really converging into the new CDOs, I would say. And so right now, because everything that we're dealing with is mobile first, and we are still continuing to fine tune the ICP. And so that's the evolution that we'll take on in the next year or two.
And so ICP, ideal customer profile, Krish, what does that look like for you guys?
Right. When we started off, it started with founder, CTO, developers as a primary persona that we started building for. And then it has, as the customers continue to grow with us, we saw the evolution of this ICP. So now we think of the ICP in three parts. That is, early stage customers is mostly a founder, CTO, and then it continues to evolve into an operations person, product manager, who actually makes a decision of choice of choosing a billing system. And then at scale, it becomes a CFO's office and still an org-wide decision. So for us as a product that continues to move up market and continues to serve customers in lower end as well as the larger customers, we see different types of persona. So we think of the ICP by segments that we serve, and it has continued to evolve for us.
And just for clarity of the audience as well, like most of Anna's customers are more large enterprises. You just mentioned we started out maybe more like small. Like what's average ACV roughly in the early days? If you can disclose that, just give an indication to the audience.
Yeah, absolutely. I think our early segment, even today, right, is we started at about $4,000 ACV. Now it's about $6,000 ACV. We still have freemium tier, and then we also have a $6,000 ACV tier, right? And then there is a $15,000 ACV tier, and then we also have the $50,000 ACV tier. So the ASP changes significantly, and depending on as we deal with larger customers, the complexity of the deal changes, and that means the price point is very different, and the decision makers on the customer side is also different, and the buying cycles is also different. So it has continued to evolve, right? So we could not figure out how to go after larger customers straight away. We started with small customers and continue to evolve with the customers with every stage of growth of the customers, and continue to the customers helped pull the product as well as pull the GTM with them. And that's how we have evolved over the years.
And now it's not like you've moved entirely there, but you're basically covering multiple segments of the market.
That is correct, right? Our idea continues to be, how do we support a customer from idea to IPO, right? All the way from freemium stage and taking them through different stages, right? Freshworks is a classic example for us and a marquee customer. Yeah. Started from sub 1 million, and then how do we support them through several hundred millions of journey and multiple products. So the complexity changes.
That's interesting. And those are different ICPs, ideal customer profiles. I guess, Anna, for you, the ICP is more clearly the enterprise, but within that enterprise, you'd mentioned that initially you started selling to the chief marketing officers more. And then at some stage you mentioned that maybe there was some friction there, and actual decision-making or movement was much faster with chief product or platform or like,
yeah, we built
those different personas within the customer, basically.
Yeah, you're right. Because when we first started, we're building a MarTech stack, right? And so that whole platform was supposed to be for CMO's office, but none of the users are part of the marketing department. And most of what we identify as the users are product teams or platform teams. And, when we first started, our ACV was, could be in the range of 150K to 500K per customer. And now we're actually going the opposite direction where Krish is at. We're going downstream and down market to high growth startups, but where the hovering ACV will still be starting probably around 50K.
Gotcha. That's interesting. And so I guess what's interesting, again, product market fit, like market and customers, what we just talked about. Once you figure that out, and it seems that, by the way, that like you always hope that you can figure it out and then that's it. But it sounds like, you have a certain customer segment, then you're starting to either move or start doing adjacent customer segments. Krish, the same with you guys. Seems all these different tiers that you just talked about. When you need to build a product for that ICP and have the conversations with these different user personas, these different buyers, like how do you build for that? And specifically, like in and of itself, that's hard. But when you have to build it for so many different segments, that's even harder. So like, how do you build the organization for that, instrument for that, measure for that?
Beautiful. I think one of the challenges of the early stage company is the shortage of resources, right? And in every stage, it almost feels like you're short of resources and not enough people to build. But I think for us, in hindsight, one thing that has worked well is helping the team be able to focus on who we are building for has been super helpful. So for that, we segmented the organization. Whatever is working well, we just started labeling it. So for example, we said our 0 to 1 million customers as startup segment, right? It's actually like businesses even sell to 0 to 100 million as SMB, right? Gartner definition encompasses everything as SMB, all the way through 100 million. But we internally deliberately put a label of 0 to 1 million as a startup, right? And 1 to 10 million initially as scale up. And then we now call that, we expanded that further. So that kind of labeling and segmentation is internally helpful all the way from lead gen to qualifying opportunities to also the product roadmap focus. Now, the biggest challenge then becomes, now if you have a certain number of customers working well in one segment, how do you make sure there is repeatability and scalability in what's working well while you are helping the team focus on the adjacent segment, right? And that's always the biggest challenge. So this kind of labeling and knowing why you are building this feature, is it for retention of a high growth customer in the early segment to help them retain them through the next phase of growth, or is it to win a new customer in the next adjacent segment? That decision process becomes a lot more clearer, right? I'm able to narrate this as if this is how we did it. No, but I think has been through a lot of mistakes and learnings that we realized that this kind of internal segmentation has been super helpful especially over the last 5 years. This segmentation focuses the entire organization to know directionally where we are going instead of actually moving in different directions.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. So it sounds like as long as you build in that clarity is manageable. If it becomes all fuzzy, then it's harder to build. And how was that for you guys? And specifically as you're describing that journey from targeting a different persona as a buyer, but also now going down market a bit. Do you have to rebuild the organization? Do you have to reprioritize your roadmap?
Yes, absolutely. We did. And with large enterprises comes with a lot of co-innovation, co-creation, and they are part of your product roadmap when you think about how much or the complexity of come with the product development. So when we first started with them, they did actually contribute to a lot of the product roadmap. But then when you look at the users from a digital native perspective, a lot of these high growth startups, they're much savvier, much more technically or data literate. And so the product owners of these teams are now actually bringing us different user experiences or use cases that normally the traditional enterprises would not. And so we're seeing a very different and opposite ends of the spectrum of super users now coming from the digital natives, and the traditional enterprises need you to spoon feed them with information and with data. And so it's a very different play. And we're trying to figure out how to balance the two, because there comes with a lot of high value CS, customer success management, and then the digital natives, they just really self-serve and they are, self-manageable. So there's these two that we're trying to straddle right now.
Gotcha. And so did you do what Krish did? Is like, hey, there's these two components, and for each of them, I have like different teams, different way of measuring, different product, or how did you manage that?
At the moment, it's still the same team because, we don't have critical mass in the SME space yet. We're just going downstream and down market at the moment. And we're still A/B testing certain markets, how effective with, our integration with Shopify and other platforms would be for e-commerce. But from a large enterprise, the CSMs are there to deliver value and, bring in the high NRRs. But when we look at the SME space, one CSM could actually manage, hundreds or maybe even dozens of different SMEs. So that's a different play. And we have not gotten that critical mass on the SME space. So our CSMs and the post-sale side is still managing really high value customers.
Gotcha. Yeah, I guess that's interesting. You're building for a different segment, and I think your challenge is obviously when you move down, they expect self-service. It has to be simple. It has to be standardized. It has to be scalable. Versus Krish, what you're going through is when I was part of AWS in the early days, Amazon in Asia, and like amazing product market fit with startups. But now enterprises, what do you mean credit card billing? What do you mean no SLAs? What do you mean no reporting? Like no master service agreement, you name it. And so enterprise grade, as they call it, like what does that mean from a security point of view, from a log management point of view, from a role-based access point of view? Like that's what you're going through right now by the sounds of it. And so how do you
correct, right? And right, even if you have all of that, right, the whole messaging and positioning of the product for a different persona is a different muscle to build in the organization to know where to put the spotlight to help deliver the message to the customer, right? So, and even supporting the salesperson, right, with the right solution engineering team, and then even offering implementation support, because if you could eliminate it from the deal because you don't provide implementation support, right? So even all these little things matter when it comes to even winning the eventual customer. So absolutely, yes, Peter. All those pieces become critical.
Interesting. And so listen, you have your customers and product figured out, and obviously that's an ongoing target, but still you're building that product for them. Knowing when you have product market fit is something that a lot of people ask, like, when do I know when I have product market fit? And the kind of the thing that sits in the middle is, okay, there's a market, there's a product, but I still have to get that product to market, right? So if you think about distribution point of view, you think about like enterprise where you have large enterprise sales teams on the ground, co-creation, even as you mentioned, Anna, versus Krish, where everything, at a 3-4K, you can't send a sales guy doing a 3-month sales cycle because your LTV CAC will be completely out of whack. How have you guys thought about your go-to-market strategies, and how have those evolved to align to that specific segment that you were going after and the type of product that you were selling?
Right. If I may. Yeah. Thank you. So one way to think about this is, so when we think about product market fit, especially like how do you know? So the wins is just the normal way we all look at it. But I think if we back up a little bit in terms of leading indicator, I think the speed of velocity with which you actually move through the funnel is a very good indicator, right? Can you get the same BLT framework, right? Can you get a technical win, right? And is the customer going through the evaluation? Then you go through the business win, right? And is the pricing a key objection? So the pace at which you actually help the lead go through the entire funnel and measuring that velocity is a very good indicator of product market fit, because who's able to do it and how many, especially if you're a founder-led company in the early stages, how much of the organization resources are you pulling in to even move them through the funnel to actually eventually land a win, right? It tells you that, is it a stretch where you're huffing and puffing for every deal, or is it moving through the funnel to a point where the team is comfortably able to win, and then you go in and then talk to the customer and then it closes? Then you know that it's actually working beautifully. Right. I think I would say look at the leading indicators, especially the velocity of how it moves through the funnel, as a good way to look at the repeatability and scalability part of PMF.
So essentially, you're saying like your sales cycle, like how many days, weeks, months, whatever your sales cycle is taking.
That is correct.
Gotcha. How about you, Anna? How do you?
Yeah, initially when we first started, it was tough because, to become a true SaaS company, you have to be, repeatable and scalable. And during the co-creation and co-innovating part of the journey and really defining our own ICP and the product market fit, it was tough because the sales cycles were much longer. It was not out of the box solution. But now as we evolve and built that whole product market fit, now you have dozens of FSIs or banking clients. You have, now emerging fintechs coming into the portfolio, and they're highly repeatable. And your gross profit margin should be hovering between 80, 85%, which is what we're doing right now. So majority of the large enterprise deals that we're doing right now is pretty much out of the box, and with exceptions of integration and some of the complex configurations that we're doing, but no, almost zero customization, right? So otherwise you cannot really scale in that perspective. So we allow our customers to have a very agile platform that is easily configurable on their own.
Gotcha. And so that is more scalable from that perspective within the segment that you're going after. How do you measure impact, and how do you measure like PMF?
We've always looked at MAU, monthly active users, or monthly engaged users. But at the same time, some of it is organically grown, as especially the digital natives, especially now you see some of these fintechs like buy now, pay later, they're just growing like gangbusters. And we have seen also wallets in certain markets, payments and e-wallets and those types of fintechs growing significantly in those unbanked markets. And so when you look at organic growth, but are they really using your platform to grow that, or also because of the COVID, phase? So timing also is really important. And when we also look at how organic growth matches with inorganic growth from our platform, we see spikes every time they use our platform or exercise campaigns on our platform to influence user behavior. We see massive spikes, and that actually is really focusing on existing internal users rather than the external forces of focusing on acquisition. So we're trying to help them monetize. So the monetization ROI metrics is really in place when the CXOs or the head of P&L or the commercial guys come into the platform and they look at what is moving the needle. Why are we here? Are we building, is this a quantifiable, measurable success metric that we're bringing to the table? Because we're at the end of the day, we're trying to build a moat, right? For large enterprises, if you don't have multi-year agreements, you're dead in the water.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. Listen, what I think is interesting, you talk about the impact on your customers. Initially MAU, but then like ROI and things like that. Krish, you mentioned more things like repeatability and scalability and movement through the sales funnel. From an investment point of view, there are some metrics that we would look at as well. And people traditionally look at like what's the lifetime value relative to your CAC. If that trends 3x or whatever, then it's okay. If it's 5x or above, like you're doing really well. Also things like sales and marketing cost over your net new ARR, specifically in SaaS, as a measurement of sales efficiency. So these are all things that we look at. Now again, those are either leading indicators or lagging indicators, but they're just data and metrics. Ultimately, it's about your sales process. Krish, are there any things that you've specifically done when you realized that the sales wasn't moving in that direction, or where you had to fine tune?
Absolutely. I think looking at the qualitative feedback becomes very, very important, right? Here we are talking about product market fit, right? So I think more than the quantitative metrics, right, which are important, I would say a huge emphasis on the qualitative metrics becomes the key. And I think we spoke about PMF being transient. I think that's something very important for every founder to remember, which is when you think that you have product market fit in one segment and then you try and repeat and scale, it does not necessarily translate into a product market fit in an adjacent segment in a new geography or something. So this is PMF is a transient thing, is a realization. So every segment that we go after, it's very important to have the beginner's mindset to think about, I have to find the product market fit, to think about everything that would make it repeatable and scalable, rather than thinking, oh, I have PMF, I can actually sell to anybody. It just doesn't work like that, right? That has been the biggest learning. I think Anna is also talking about coming down market as a process. And I think this is something very, very important to remember.
Gotcha. No, that's interesting. Listen, I think what we're saying is market is not static. The segment you're going after is not static. As a result, product cannot be static. And you're constantly having different products for different market segments and having to prove PMF again. No, that's useful. Cool. No, that was super, guys. I'll wrap up with some key takeaways based on what you said, right? I think the first piece we talked about was like, and obviously this is for the audience, hopefully as a useful takeaway, but like start with defining your ideal customer profile, really know who you're building for and have clarity on that. And have clarity, as Anna was talking about it, about the user personas within your customer that you need to target, right? That's the first thing we talked about. Second, like listen to these customers and prioritize ruthlessly when you build product for them. We talked about like different aspects of different customer segments and how you understand the needs and build for that. And then third, when it comes to like, do I have PMF or not? Look out for customer love and ease of selling. And I think Anna mentioned specifically the customer love, the impact there, the ROI, the MAU, etc. And Krish talked about that ease of selling, the efficiency. And if you feel that sales is still brute forcing, pushing a rock uphill, you clearly don't have PMF. When you feel that things just start flowing, then you might be onto something, and then it's time to double down. So I hope that was useful, guys. Anna, thank you so much. Krish, thank you so much. And with that, we'll give it a wrap. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. It was fun being here. Thank you.
Thank you.